everyone.
Good
Welcome to
morning.
our first technical committee meeting of the year. Members, if you are not at BMC, please turn your cameras on during roll call and also for voting items. This meeting is being recorded. If anyone should experience difficulties during the meeting, please send a message in the chat box. At this time, Rebecca will start the roll call to determine member participation.
City of Annapolis.
Aye.
Anne Arundel County.
Tanya Asman in for Brian Ulrich.
Thank you. Baltimore City.
Present.
Baltimore County.
Here.
Carroll County.
Here.
Hartford County.
Here.
Howard County.
Here.
Queen Anne's County.
Here.
MDOT.
Here.
MDE.
Here.
MDP.
Here.
MDOT MTA.
Here.
MDOT SHA.
Here.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Rebecca. Prior to the approval of the minutes, we have a member of the public that would like to make a statement.
Michael, go ahead and provide your comment.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it. So I just wanted to speak to the item, I think it's number 6, the active transportation scoring. I first of all, I just really wanted to thank you guys for picking that up. I'm very thankful that you're putting real effort into scoring active transportation projects alongside road and transit projects. That's fantastic moves. I really appreciate that. I wanted to just share a few thoughts. So I'm Michael Sapanek. I'm president of POP, Baltimoreans for People-Oriented Places. I think you guys are familiar with us. So we've been discussing it. This is not necessarily like a statement on behalf of the group. I just wanted to share some early thoughts. I think I disagree on any decision to not factor in access to jobs when scoring an active transportation project for accessibility. I get the justification that few people today use active transportation to get to work, but I think that's simply conceding to our current status quo and that allowing that status quo to remain as such. I think we need to get a little more aspirational here and let this project scoring effort be the start, the very start of building an active transportation network that becomes really fundamental to people's lives. And that, of course, includes getting to work. The presenters at the last meeting expressed that, apparently collective doubts that any jurisdiction would want to burn one of their high or medium priority project slots for an active transportation project. And I can understand that. I assume the reason for this is that jurisdictions they're going to want to reserve those slots for, the expensive projects that have low technical scores. And I would say that instead of trying to figure out how to correct for that in the policy scoring area, I would say instead increase the number, like maybe really largely, increase the possible number of technical points for an active transportation project, somewhere maybe into the 60 or 65 point range, in order to offset the expected reality that they're just not going to get policy points, at least not anytime soon. We made a group comment on the transportation planning budget, the 2026-27 one. And in it, we made the comment that given induced demand, we don't see how many or any highway projects in the long term cause less hours of delay. And I know that we've disputed that, and I don't get the sense that the BRTB really buys into the induced demand concept, which we dispute that. But our recommendation at that time was really just to was that the scoring criteria be modified such that highway expansion projects, they just aren't eligible for points for mobility. So we could use this as an opportunity to take the mobility points away from road projects, keep the scoring for transit projects as is, and maybe add 5 more possible points to active transportation projects, maybe for safety. because they're ultimately the most safe projects, especially for vulnerable road users who are the most at risk on the roads. So that would result essentially in 40 points for roadway projects, 55 for transit, and maybe 60 for active transportation. And the bottom line is I think we really need to put a really heavy thumb on the scale for active transportation projects via their technical merits. Because making them fight for policy points will only result in the envisioning and funding of mega-sized active transportation projects. And I really think that's a really bad way to go. The active transportation projects should be rather small scale in relation to, a roadway widening or the red line. Like they're just so much smaller scale, and they really should be approached in an incremental fashion, and doing it, letting them blow up into size and fighting with these big roadway and transit projects. It's just going to run the risk of really inflaming community opposition to active transportation projects, we do not need that. So I would really, that's the end of my comment. But I would really encourage, try to really think, a little expansively, maybe creatively, in how to make this work. Because it is trying to be wedged into an existing scoring criteria structure. And I think we need to be a little careful with it. I definitely say move forward, especially with this coming LRTP. But let's maybe try to be a little creative with it. But again, thank you very much for this initiative. It's fantastic.
Thank you, Michael. Our first item is approval of the minutes from the technical committee meeting in December. Have members had a chance to review the minutes? Can I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes?
Hartford County will need to approve minutes from December.
Thank you, Hartford County.
Second.
Second, thank you, MTA. We will now have an approval of the minutes. When your name is read, please indicate aye or nay. Rebecca, please read down the list of members.
Annapolis,
Aye.
Anne Arundel County,
Aye.
Baltimore City,
Aye.
Baltimore County,
Aye.
Carroll County,
Aye.
Hartford County,
Aye.
Howard County,
Aye.
Queen Anne's County,
Aye.
MDOT,
Aye.
Thank you. The December minutes are approved. We will now consider sending resolution 26-18 to the BRTB for approval. The resolution is to endorse 5 updated highway safety performance targets. Ms. Cindy Birch will provide the information. Cindy?
Yeah.
Oh, there. There we go. All right, good morning, everyone, and Happy New Year. I have good news for the new year, but we'll save that for later. We'll get through the worst part first. As Angie mentioned, I'm here to talk about the 5 safety performance measures. Do it every year, so we'll just jump right in. So this is the last 5 years of information, just to let you know. On the top table is for our region. Excuse me, on the bottom is for the state as a whole. So if you look, you can see we had low numbers in 21 and 22, a blip in 23 that was seen statewide as well. 24 started coming back down. The preview is 25 is even better. But right now we're just working through the full calendar year of 24 to look at our targets. So we're on the downswing, which is good. This is just graphical representation of that. So you can see our fatalities were in the blue line on the bottom and the states on the top. Unfortunately, serious injuries have gone up a little bit in 2024. That might be a trade-off from the fatalities coming down. Now people are just, they're surviving the crashes. They're still injured from the crashes and seeking treatment. We'd have to do a little more digging to see if that's the actual correlation of why the serious injuries have gone up. Sometimes in the past, that's also just been due to reporting, because this is an injury severity reported by police officers on the scene, not by clinical personnel. So it may be they're just seeing more injuries that they're determining as serious. And then the last metric, we look at the last category, what's called non-motorist fatalities and serious injuries. These we put together. These are performance measures in the transportation bill from the federal government. So we have fatalities and we do a fatality rate, serious injuries, we do a serious injury rate, and then we put fatalities and serious injuries just for non-motorists together. Pardon me. Unfortunately, we've seen an increase in that in the past couple of years. Again, this is fatalities and serious injuries together. So when we break them apart, you can see the yellow box is the fatalities. So we actually had a decrease in that. We had fewer fatalities among our non-motorists, but there was a slight increase in the serious injuries. So that's why overall the total number went up. But as far as lives saved, we are seeing that number come back down starting in 2024. Just to give you a little bit of perspective as far as our region, what we amount to in the state, we have about half of the state's crashes, half of their serious injuries, half of their total injuries of all levels, but only 40% of the fatalities. So while we're a big portion of the state, very populous area, I think we're doing pretty good. We can always do better. We don't want any fatalities, but we have a much lower proportion of the state's fatalities than we do compared to other metrics. And we have about 46% of the state's VMT. So to the business at hand, like I said, it's part of the federal regulations. There's these 5 targets. The state has to update them every year and submit them. And then within 180 days after that report goes in, each of the NPOs has to do it. So ours are due by the end of February. This effort all started back in January of 2018. So we've been doing it for 8 years now. What the BRTB has done in all of those years has been to adopt the state methodology for setting targets, but customizing them to our numbers. So what any MPO can do, they can either adopt the state's targets whole cloth, or they can set their own. And what the BRTB kind of went down the middle, we'll use your methodology, but we're going to use our own numbers so they're more focused. So what the state was doing and what they just turned in their last report was using an exponential forecast. The feds want us to use 5-year rolling averages. So everything's going to be a 5-year average, but for a single year, we take the midpoint of that. So that 5-year average of 2005 to 2009, started with that, set out the graph and the exponential trend line. If it was an increasing trend line, the state wanted to apply a 2% reduction. They didn't want to show increasing targets, and they wanted to show something slightly aspirational, but potentially feasible to accomplish. We are a Vision Zero state, as I'm sure a lot of you know. If not, I forget what year that was, several years ago, passed a bill that we're a Vision Zero state. So the vision is zero. We all want to get to zero. But the state has adopted this methodology to have it be set statistically and to have what might be more achievable goals in their view, where they're sitting at 600 fatalities a year. To get to zero in 2030 didn't quite seem as feasible as if they set this statistically. So that's where this methodology came from. So what the question for today, this is the interactive portion of my presentation today. I'm going to show you our 5 targets. Usually every other time I've been up here, it's been clear cut. This is an increasing trend, we apply the 2%. Or this is our decreasing trend, here's our target. This year, with the fatality rate, it is a flat trend. So flat as flat can be. So my question for you guys is, we checked with MDOT. MDOT says, whatever you want to do, we have our rules we have to follow. The MPO rule is just, you have to set your own targets, you have your own options. So because there's really no change in it, it's not clear cut, where do we just extend that trend? Or do we go ahead and apply the 2% aspirational reduction? So this is what it looks like. Each of the blue bars is our 5-year rolling averages, all the way back to 2005 to 2009. So this is all the data used for this. That is a flat trend. So I could get in all the exponential numbers, but trust me, it's like 0.00000005 is the trend. So the two options we would like to propose to you, if there's a third option, something else you want to do, obviously it's up to you guys. If we follow the exponential trend, go ahead and just put it all the way up. It's the exact same number through 2027. So if we apply the 2% reduction, it fluctuates a little bit, but for 2027, it does give us the same number. It still comes out to 0.85. The 2030 goal, I'll show you in a second, does adjust a little bit differently. But so this is what the numbers would look like if we put interim targets for each of the next 5 years, if we apply nothing, or if we apply a 2% annual reduction. This is what it would come down.
Can you remind me what the units are for this?
This is a VMT rate, so it's per 100 million vehicle miles traveled. So just to keep going while y'all mull that over and think about it, to look at some other folks, we looked at TPV down in the Washington area and what they did. What they do is when they have an increasing trend, they cap their targets. So whereas we would apply a 2% reduction, they capped them. So this is a little hard to see, but their most recent targets they adopted, 3 of the 5 are capped. They've had the same targets for about 6 or 7 years because they've been steady increasing trends. So that's something we could always do, which is essentially what that exponential would be. It was the exact same target every year. And then we look over at our HEPMO partners out in Hagerstown, the Eastern Panhandle. They adopt the state targets outright. So you can see their targets are actually pretty high. They're up around 500 because they just took the state targets and made it their own, which is an option. Because our numbers are smaller, we have about 200 fatalities each year. And looking at our VMT, because they've been tracking along our rate chain. So I'll go back over to this before I tell you what I would propose. Does anybody have any questions or thoughts? Have I not explained this very well? Do you know where I'm coming from with this?
To clarify, sorry, so to clarify, these numbers represent the reduction in fatalities per 1 million VMT, or this represents the limit of?
This would be what our targets are. So right now, sorry for the flipping. Let me come back over here. I should have put this in a better spot. I apologize. So right now in 2023, it's the third row down. Our current rate is 0.95. In 2024, I'm sorry, that was 2023. In 2024, our current rate is 0.94. So we came down a little bit. We didn't come down much because our fatalities came down a little bit, but our VMTs went up. So if we were to just project this out, so we would be assuming a slight increase in VMT over time. Sorry, it's actually about the same. I wouldn't say an increase, and a slight decrease in fatalities. It would still just, it would be flat. So do we want to keep it flat, which is statistically the methodology that we would use, or do we want to put a little bit of aspirational in there and set our targets at 2% down? I think there were a couple of chat.
And we've done the aspirational in the past, right? That's what we've been doing.
We haven't had this situation in the past, actually. We've either had a clear increase where we applied that aspirational, or we've had a clear decrease. So this is the first time that it's kind of on the table. And like I said, there's no right or wrong answer. It's what you would like to do. And we did check with some of the folks over and that do the highway safety improvement program, and they said that whatever you guys want to do, you do your own targets anyway, and they don't have this problem. So
I'm not meaning to be flippant, but
it's fine.
why does this matter? Like, are there consequences if we choose the wrong one?
No, there's no wrong answer. You can choose whatever you want to do. As far as why it matters, I would just say there's general discussion out there among different states and with the feds and people like that about, should we be more aspirational? Should we always be applying bigger and better decreases? Should we be basing it on the statistics? It's the more can't think of the right word, but somewhere we're vision zero, shouldn't our target be zero, or should it be realistic, or, you know, things like that's just really, I think, what it comes down to. Do we want to be aspirational and apply that, even though it's a slight decrease? Or do we want to say, no, we stand in our statistical methodology, which is a straight flat line? But no, there's no consequences to it.
So there's no
That's
negative or positive either way,
correct,
if you don't meet the goal this year, or what you set the goal at, right?
correct.
Cindy, this is Tanya. I have a question about that.
Okay.
Is there any risk of public perception if we don't meet a aspirational goal being negative?
There's been discussion in the past about why aren't our goals set at zero? We haven't honestly met goals in several years, just because you've seen the fluctuation in the fatalities as they go up. We're not meeting the goals that year, so whatever public perception we've had in those past years, I would say is what we would experience again. Yes,
So-
sir.
I guess, I mean, from your side, what are the things that drive things up and down? And is there anything in the room that we can do in this room or not, or is it just?
That is
we're
the
just
$1,000,000
we're sort of a
question.
pick from the
Were you
outside,
gonna say
correct?
something, Regina? I'm sorry, that's your $1,000,000 question.
So I'll stand up.
Powerball
Yeah.
So this is, yeah.
So going back to, why to do this, actually in the past, as we've been passing these resolutions, have been public comments asking that we look at what the Washington region does and start looking at aspirational goals as opposed to just following the set formula
Mhm.
that the federal government, kind of recommends.
Mhm.
In terms of what is causing this, I think everyone is kind of now getting more involved, and we've had presentations on the state's strategic highway safety plan. And they have emphasis areas. We're tracking all of those. We have team members, BMC staff on each one of those individual groups. And each one of you as counties and cities have kind of developed your own local strategic highway safety plan. So there's not one individual answer, but it's more customized to what's happening within your jurisdiction. So I think focusing on, what are the emphasis areas within your county are what's driving these numbers. And then the state, taking efforts as they are both at State Highway Administration and then also through the law enforcement community, to try to make sure that we're addressing the items that we see on a regular basis, because they do fluctuate. During pandemic, we saw speeds go up, we saw more fatalities. We're seeing fluctuations in the pedestrians and bicyclists, and trying to address those individual issues as they kind of become more prone.
Say really the only clear thing I've seen over the past many years was the jump in the pandemic, and we attributed that to fewer cars on the road, higher speeds, definite change in behaviors these past few years since we've all come back into mostly regular traffic patterns. I can't pinpoint, I would love to, exactly what's driving all of that. We're seeing our VMTs back up to where they were. So it's good our fatalities are coming down in that regard. It's just, I guess they aren't coming down fast enough for the rate. Yes, sir.
Has the fatality heat map shifted at all in the last 5 years for the Baltimore region? I mean, the majority of these are coming from.
So it's not exactly a heat map, but here's the breakdown by county. So the proportion and city, the proportion within each of our jurisdictions has remained about the same. This is our good news. I'll jump to the good news. These are our reductions in 2025. As we close out that year, we're down 20%. Would love to know what happened last year. They were down 20%. And a lot of us are down a lot. But in general, our patterns, at least within the jurisdictions, are about the same. Unfortunately, we're being driven by the county, Baltimore County and Baltimore City, but they're our most populous and our most urban. So I'm sorry, I just don't know. I don't have an answer for you. In general, people have seen higher speeds. Now that we have a lot more automated enforcement, they're seeing how fast people are driving through those zones. And we now have the graduated or tiered penalties. So we're seeing how much those penalties are being given out. So they're not just speeding, they're speeding at extreme speed. So we are able to identify some of those behaviors to try to curb them. Behavior change is the tricky part, so to try to get people to drive more safely. And then I guess in 2025, we probably saw the most of the impact, end of 24 of losing the Key Bridge. So that also changed our traffic patterns and may have contributed to some other more interactions, maybe with different vehicle types on roads that weren't there.
But also these 2025 numbers are not finalized. We still have.
They're as of today.
Right.
Technically, we should have them finalized at the end of the month, but
Really? I thought there was like a 6-month trail on the reporting.
there's a 6-month trail. But the reporting rules are, if someone were to die from injuries associated with a vehicle crash, if it's within 30 days, it's considered a traffic fatality
Okay.
by US DOT rules. If it's at that 31st day, it's not counted anymore. So theoretically, after January 30th, we should be able to get a count of it. There is a lag as far as the reporting and getting those numbers turned into the state.
Right.
But theoretically, we should have a more solid number February or March. But throughout the year, as they've been tracking as of the same date the prior year, we've been tracking 20% down. Almost 20%. Because even the state's a little, they're hesitant to congratulate themselves.
Minor comment, the PowerPoint in front of you was printed before the new numbers
Oh,
came out.
yes, thank you.
So when we post this online, you'll see what's on the screen,
I wanted to update these this morning,
just
so.
in case anybody notices it doesn't match.
So just, when we have an increase in fatalities, we apply a 2% decrease in our projections.
Yeah.
Basically to state our goal that we are working towards a reduction.
Yes.
And I think if we're in a situation of being flat, we ought to have that same intent, that we ought to show a 2% reduction,
Okay.
showing, even though it's flat right now, our goal and our intent is still to make that decrease. And
To not be
showing
flat.
that 2%, it's showing our goal towards that progress or what we hope to achieve. So I think that, in my opinion, I think showing the decrease would be better than keeping it flat.
Okay. Any other thoughts or objections? That was what I was, as staff member here, working with the bosses sitting next to me, that's what we were gonna recommend as well. So thank you, Steve. I did not ask him to say that, but that's what we were gonna.
Just being involved in this before and working through this before, I think
Yeah.
it's important that we communicate our goal to the public, that we are committed to this, and want to see that reduction.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So that's what these would look to be with that. So these already fatalities, serious injuries, and serious injury rate, because the serious injuries changed so much. They were, the way all the math came out with the rolling averages since 2005, those were all reductions. So this fatality rate and the number of non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries, over time, that still came out to an increasing trend, so it's a 2% reduction. So these are what the targets that we're proposing. Okay, and these are the state trends. They're very similar to what we're seeing in the region. So just to skip back ahead to what we were saying a little bit, what can we do? What are we doing, at least here at with the BRTB, working with all of you to do some of these things. A lot of these are your work, we're not taking credit for. We had, again, we're still doing the Look Alive campaign through the Highway Safety Office. We did what we called a hyper-local safety campaign this past year where we wanted to get into those smaller local outlets. So they were publications or media or targeted digital media focused on different groups, whether it was through a parenting magazine or it was through a Spanish radio station or something like that, to try to get the messages out more locally and more focused to supplement or complement the statewide media pushes. We have a new project we just kicked off 2 months ago, I guess 3 months ago. I want to look into crash data analytics and different telematics and try and find out ways, how can we bring in that telematics data to help support all of you in your safety planning Because again, even though we have big numbers up here, it's still a random event to have a crash. We all drive a lot and don't get these crashes, and hopefully we don't know too many people that have died in them. So what else is happening? What are those other behaviors that we want to mitigate before they turn into a crash or a fatality? We're becoming a lot more involved with the state's Vision Zero process. Some of you have heard from me already. When your cases come up for Vision Zero review, we're sitting down, we're talking about, I'm trying to bring that local perspective in to that infrastructure review that got done. And of course, we're always open to new ideas. We have one currently on the table to expand road safety audits and coordinate more with the Vision Zero group, so. And then lastly, awards were announced December 30th, I think we came up with, from the recent round of Safe Streets and Roads for All from USDOT. Harford County's getting some money to do some good stuff over there with their engineering studies. And University of Maryland Downtown is gonna do a health impact collaborative to support the Baltimore City Vision Zero plan. There were only 4 awards in the state. We got 2 of them in the region. And just one last reminder, we do have crash data dashboards here that get updated every month at the beginning of the month. That's sitting right over there, the genius behind all of this. So there's data up there back through 2018. You can look at all of that. We want to customize them in ways that support you and what you're doing. So if there's something you want to see or haven't seen, or you want to see it differently, please let us know. But those are up there for your use as well. And I'm sure I've talked your ears off for the Data Geek hour, so thank you, ma'am. I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Cindy. I now ask for a member to move for approval of resolution 26-18 and then a second. Does any member have any questions or comments on the resolution?
I'm sorry, just to remind you, the resolution is crafted with that 2% reduction on fatality.
Thank you.
Anything in the chat box?
No, there isn't.
All right.
Was there a motion in a second?
No, second.
Queen Anne's County will make a motion to approve resolution 26-18.
Thank you.
Steve. Steve and Dan?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, second.
All right, we will now vote on approval of resolution 26-18, where your name is read. Please indicate aye or nay. Rebecca, can you bring down the list?
Annapolis,
Aye.
Monroe County,
Aye.
Baltimore City,
Aye.
Baltimore County,
Aye.
Carroll County,
Aye.
Harford County,
Aye.
Howard County,
Aye.
Queen Anne's,
Aye.
and Don.
Thank you. The resolution has passed. Resolution 26-19 has been deferred until February at the request of Harford County. We will now consider a request to amend the TIP for One Transportation Authority project. Mr. Keith Kuchar will introduce the new TIP planner, Ms. Nicole Condell.
Thank you, Angie. As some of you, most of you probably already know, I'll be transitioning out of the TIP coordinator role, doing other duties here at BMC. So taking my place, some of you probably already remember her from previous stint here at BMC, but Nicole Condell will be taking over as the TIP program manager. She'll also be doing some other duties as she gets acclimated to her new position here. So I'm going to turn it over to Nicole, let her introduce the next amendment.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Nice to see you all and some familiar faces as well. And so as mentioned, we have a couple of resolutions for amendments to the TIP. So we will go ahead and start with resolution 26-20. And this is from the Maryland Transportation Authority, MBTA, requesting to add one new project to the 26 to 29 TIP. And this is for the William Preston Lane Jr. Memorial Bridge, the Bay Bridge, adding planning funds to allow completion of planning efforts for the Bay Crossing study. The ICG is scheduled to meet tomorrow to discuss this project as well. And we have Ms. Heather Lowe with us to present the project details. So I'll go ahead and pass things over to Heather. And if not, I'm happy to jump in as needed.
Alyssa, it looks like
Yeah.
dropped off the
Oh
Zoom link.
boy. Okay, she might be having some trouble. Are you able to hear me?
She's online. Heather, maybe you were muted?
Well, if she's having some technical difficulty, I am here and I can certainly pinch hit. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. Then I guess we can get started and we'll give her a minute. Hopefully, hold on one sec. Let me just check here. Can you get on? Okay, well, I will be honest with you. I was having some issues with my computer as well this morning, issues that I can't define because I don't really know what was wrong with it. So she may be having some issues as well. So I'm going to apologize for technical difficulties, but I cannot diagnose them. I'll introduce myself. I'm Melissa Williams. I'm the Director of Planning and Program Development at MDTA.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, Heather is here now. Okay.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry.
Okay. Well, then I will turn it over to Heather. Heather and I are co-parenting or co-managing this project. So we were debating whether we were going to give the presentation together or Heather was going to, but Heather, if you want to take over, go for it.
I'm happy to do that, Melissa, since I've prepared. But
no
thank you for
problem.
being willing to jump in there. I'm sorry about that technical
Not a problem.
difficulty there. I've been talking to the computer for 5 minutes. So, okay. Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. So a quick project overview. The Chesapeake Bay Crossing Study Tier 2 NEPA, or Tier 2 study is how you'll hear us referring to the project. The purpose is to address existing and future transportation capacity needs and access across the Chesapeake Bay Bridge and at the Chesapeake Bay Bridge approaches along the US 5301 corridor. The Tier 2 study is evaluating measures to reduce congestion, improve travel times and reliability, mobility, and roadway deficiencies, and to accommodate maintenance activities and navigation while minimizing impacts to local communities and the environment. Next slide. So our next slide is the Tier 2 study schedule. We are nearing the end of the study. You can see in the yellow circle to the right of the screen. We began this Tier 2 study in 2022. We've held 3 rounds of public meetings for the project, and we are coming up on public hearings to be held in February. So next month, we'll hold public hearings for the study. We will be releasing the draft environmental impact statement a little later this month, so stay tuned for that. After the public hearings, we will be reviewing, evaluating, considering all comments we receive on that draft environmental impact statement and working on the combined final environmental impact statement and record of decision, which will complete the NEPA study. So following the NEPA study, we'll be moving into design and construction, pending funding. If the stars align with funding, we could begin construction in 2032. Next slide. So we're here today to request a TIP amendment to add the Tier 2 study, the planning study, to the TIP because we're only using planning funds, the project would be exempt from the conformity analysis. We will be presenting to the ICG tomorrow to confirm that exemption. And we will be back to see you again a little later this year in the spring to request another TIP amendment to add engineering funds to the TIP. And this would be so that when we're ready for that final environmental impact statement and record of decision to be signed later this year, the Federal Highway Administration can do that if we have funds for a phase following planning in the TIP. At that time, when we come back in the in the spring, that TIP amendment would require a conformity analysis. Next slide. So this slide shows the funding that we are proposing to include in the TIP. As I've gone over, we're very close to the end of the planning study. So for fiscal year 2026, we would be adding $7 million. And then the planning study would be complete. Next slide. So that was a quick overview of the study and what we are here to discuss today. Are there any questions?
See,
I had a quick question. This is planning money for Tier 2 NEPA, and we're completing the process, and congratulations on getting to the preferred alternative. Big milestone in the whole process, so something to be very proud of to get to that point.
Thank you.
We're adding $7 million in planning money to what previous dollar amount in planning money? In the previous years, we had the Tier 1, Tier 2 NEPA process, which cost us a certain amount of money, and we're adding $7 million to complete that process. So
yes.
What the $7 million to in order to get to the record of decision?
Sure. Keeping in mind that this is all MDTA money, it's not.
Understood.
It's not state money, it's MDTA money. We had originally looked at about 28 million total.
Okay, so we're at 28 million, this 7 is in addition to that?
No. No, about 21 plus 7, about 28 total.
Okay, thank you.
any other questions from members online?
I don't see any. All right. I now ask for a member to move for approval of resolution 26-20 and then a second.
Queen Anne's County will make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Queen Anne's County.
Harper County will second.
Thank you, Harper County. No additional questions? Nothing in the chat box? We will now vote on approval of the resolution to amend the tip for this MDTA project where your name is read. Please indicate aye or nay. Rebecca, can you please read down the list of members?
Annapolis,
Aye.
Anne Arundel County,
Aye.
Baltimore City,
Aye.
Baltimore County, Carroll County,
Aye.
Harford County,
Aye.
Howard County,
Aye.
Queen Anne's,
Aye.
and MDOT.
Thank you. We will, the resolution has passed.
Thank you, Heather. Melissa.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We will now consider resolution 26-21, which is to amend the tip for one Baltimore City project. Ms. Conville, please introduce the resolution.
Thank you very much, Angie. So as noted, this is a proposed resolution 26-21, in which Baltimore City is requesting to amend an existing project in the 26 to 29 tip. This amendment will increase funding from multiple sources, and it also revises the title of the project to be a little more specific to Washington Street Bikeway and Traffic Calming. It's also proposed that this be recommended to remain exempt from conformity analysis, and will also be discussed at ICG tomorrow as well. And we have Ms. May Hanslick from Baltimore City to present the details of this project. And I'll go ahead and pass it over to May online.
Great. Nicole, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. Good morning, all. My name is May Hanslick. I'm a planner here at Baltimore City Department of Transportation, and here to talk to you a little bit about our Washington Street Bikeway and Traffic Calming Tip Amendment. You can go to the next slide. Quick overview of this project for those who might not be familiar. This project is located on Washington Street from Sinclair Lane to Alice Anna in Baltimore City. So that is on our southeast portion of the city. It is a fairly significant project. It is 2.1 miles in length and will include a two-way cycle track along the entire project length. It will also include a number of ADA ramps, close to 200 upgrades, and it will include traffic signal upgrades or rehabs at 16 intersections. It will also help improve transit efficiency. We've been coordinating with MTA on this by the addition of about 10 bus boarding bulbs and corresponding bus pads. The goals of this project, you may be able to guess yourself, but the goals is to improve safety, especially for vulnerable road users, reduce speeding, decrease crashes, and expand multimodal connections. Next slide. The current status of this project is that we have completed 95% design and are in the process of integrating comments from our reviewers. We are awaiting comments from SHA as well. We received NEPA, the PCE, in December just last year, and we have recently received an HTIP award for construction last month as well, which is why we want to amend our TIP. Next slide. So Nicole gave a brief overview of this at the beginning, but again, we're looking to amend the TIP in the following ways. We need to do this because we need to update to make sure that we have enough estimated construction costs and that it accurately reflects our matching local funds. So this will update it to reflect our recent HTIP award, $4.53 million, 4 of that being federal and about $500,000 from local funds. It will also reallocate funds from TIP ID 12-1218 -07 to help meet construction needs. This is our TIP ID that is titled Citywide Traffic Signals Intelligent Transportation System and Safety Improvement Project. And since our project will be addressing 16 traffic signals along the project corridor, we thought that this could be a good way to share costs across the agency. So we're recommending moving $2.64 million, $2 million of that federal from this TIP to the Washington Street TIP. And then lastly, updating the project title. This project was originally conceived as a feasibility study of both Wolf Street, which is just to the west of Washington Street, and Washington Street. So we're suggesting changing this from the Wolf and Washington project to just Washington, since that reflects the project in its current format. And lastly, we're going to update the estimated total cost from $5.76 million to $12.123 to include the construction costs. Next slide. Excellent. Let me know if I can answer any questions.
Yeah. Is there a project page where we could look at some of the designs?
Yes, I'm happy to put that in the chat. We maintain an updated Streets of Baltimore page. The 95% designs have not been uploaded as we're in the process of incorporating comments, but I'm happy to email those to any who would like to see them. And I will put the Streets of Baltimore page in the chat.
I'll share that with everybody.
Any other questions from members or in the chat box? I now ask for a member to move for approval of resolution 26-21 and then a second.
Howard County moves.
Howard County. Any second?
Harford County second.
Thank you. No further questions? All right. We will now vote on approval of the resolution to amend the TIP for this Baltimore City project. Where your name is read, please indicate aye or nay. Rebecca, can you read down the list of members?
Annapolis,
Aye.
Anne Arundel County, Baltimore City,
Aye.
Baltimore County,
Aye.
Carroll County,
Aye.
Harford County,
Aye.
Howard County,
Aye.
Queen Anne's County,
Aye.
and MDOT.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. The resolution has passed.
Thank you.
Thank you, May. We will now have a presentation on active transportation project scoring. Mr. Kyle Hearing from Foursquare will provide part 2 of the update on work to create an active transportation project scoring methodology for use in a long-range transportation plan. Kyle?
Sorry. Okay. Thank you all for having us back. As promised, we are returning to talk a little bit about the program and policy recommendations that accompany some of the technical scoring that we covered last month. I also just want to start by thanking you all for your feedback on last month's presentation and the comment earlier today. We didn't get a chance to talk through any of the policy recommendations, but kind of through a quirk of the scheduling, we're back to you to discuss the supportive policies and programming before we go back to the steering committee to talk through the final project scoring. In any case, I will get on with it. So I wanted to just set the stage by talking through kind of what we heard from the peers and just reviewing some of the context for this active transportation elevation work that we're doing. Introduce some potential policy and program recommendations, and then of course we'll have time to answer questions and discuss. So starting with the context and peer findings, I think it's important to acknowledge that active transportation projects, as we actually heard earlier today, are often disadvantaged by traditional planning and funding frameworks. So I know this is probably not news to you all, but bears mention nevertheless. There's specific challenges related to scale and cost mismatch. So active transportation projects tend to be much smaller and much lower cost, where the regional scoring is calibrated for large, very capital intensive projects, which can often make active transportation projects seem less significant, oftentimes despite higher benefit per dollar. That comes into play when we think about policy scoring, because if you can tap a very expensive project as a high value or high priority, you're probably more likely to do that because the return on the dollar is higher. At the same time, those benefits associated with active transportation projects are somewhat difficult to quantify. A lot of the core benefits come from safety, comfort, mobility, quality of life. And these are, because of project scale, often quite diffuse and locally oriented. And unlike roadway or transit projects, we don't maintain a regional travel model that allows us to understand changes in walking and biking. Additionally, and related to that, mode shift from single occupancy vehicles is not something that we can reliably assume based on infrastructure, at least at this point in time. And then the last thing that I'll note, kind of related to just how this works, is that LRT, Long Range Transportation Plan, and Transportation Improvement Plan processes are going to inherently impose fixed administrative requirements, as well as compliance and reporting costs, which can, in the case of much smaller active transportation projects, disproportionately represent a disproportionate share of the total project cost. The result is that you might see fewer project submissions and weaker participation, kind of diminishing the potential project pipeline. So to address all of this, we're in the process of developing program and policy recommendations that are going to support the development of regionally significant active transportation projects and hopefully reframe some of the decision-making processes so active transportation projects are not penalized for gaps in documentation. You can't reliably predict how many trips this is going to defer. So based on research that we've conducted and interviews we've held with your peer agencies, we see several areas of opportunity for policy and programming. The first is to help convert priorities to project delivery. And this is really critical to task, essentially linking the long-range transportation plan and transportation improvement program so that the projects we're identifying get built. We also want to promote the development of high-quality projects, which we think can be supported with technical assistance for sponsors, which is going to ultimately help strengthen the submissions. And then to help these high-quality projects get built, set-asides and funding targets are opportunities to ensure a sustainable stream of funding for this infrastructure. Finally, by working to facilitate collaboration between project sponsors, we can promote the development of the most significant regional investments that might otherwise be difficult to plan. So before we get into the specific recommendations, which I'll turn over to my colleague Jim, I think there's some really great examples from the peers that we learned about. And I'll reiterate this, but these are not necessarily all appropriate for the Baltimore region, but I think it's helpful to think about them when it comes to identifying what is appropriate for the Baltimore region. So MORPC in Columbus, Ohio has really invested in supporting project sponsors with complete streets resources. I know this might seem very basic, but they've really gone above and beyond. They curate external resources, they maintain their own resources, even down to a library of equipment. If you want to borrow a radar gun and a measuring wheel, they've got that ready for you. So you can actually kind of start visioning the process or the project with support from them, even in terms of equipment. On a somewhat similar, but kind of also totally different note, DRCOG in Denver maintains this web application that we've got a couple screenshots on the screen from. Essentially, this is going to allow project sponsors or allows project sponsors to upload geospatial files representing the project, at which point it will kind of score that project to the extent that it can automatically. So they can internally, before even submitting anything, really understand exactly what's going to happen through that scoring process. This is going to promote the development of projects that are really aligned with the agency goals as evidenced by their scoring criteria. Within the funding realm, ARC in Atlanta has a few tools that they'll use to ensure active transportation funding is kind of consistently deployed and they're not leaving anything on the table. They'll apply a rollover to unused set-aside funds, so they maintain a set-aside, and any funds that are not used in a period can get rolled over to the next period. But in order to minimize that in the first place, they use a boost, which allows them to kind of shift funding from projects. So if something's already received funding and another project didn't use all of their funding, they can just transfer that over within the same funding cycle. And then they also have a clawback, which remains theoretical, at least as of the time of our interview, but gives them a mechanism for ensuring active transportation funds get used for active transportation infrastructure. So if, for example, a bike ped element of a project was removed, they could take back that funding. In Philadelphia, the DVRPC caps roadway expansion and sets a green infrastructure funding target. So the green infrastructure funding target includes active transportation projects. And then NCT-COG in Dallas maintains a policy credit program. I thought this was really interesting. Essentially, they will take funds that are generated through tolls and give them to sponsors to use for the local match in exchange for adopting policies that they deem friendly for active transportation. So if you adopt a complete streets policy, you might be eligible for some of that funding revenue, toll revenue that you could use towards a local match for an active transportation project. So again, not all of these are necessarily appropriate for this region, but I did want to share some of those interesting approaches to elevating active transportation through programming and policy. With that, I will turn it over to Jim to talk about what we do think is appropriate for this region.
Thanks, Kyle. I'm Jim Elliott with Tool Design, and I'm here with a couple of my colleagues, Byron Rushing, who worked with the Atlanta Regional Commission for many years, and Jim Sebastian, who worked for WashCog many years ago, and then for DDOT for many years. And I'm going to invite them to chime in and add to and amplify my comments where it's appropriate throughout this presentation. Going to build on the context that Kyle provided by focusing on a few key issues related to supporting development of active transportation projects through the LRTP TIP process and linking them to potential policy responses or recommended policy responses based on our peer research. And these are preliminary recommendations. As I do this, I'll highlight some peer examples. Kyle has already done that. I'll add some more and detail our preliminary recommendations. Next slide. Sorry, go back. And then next slide. Okay, so one issue that BMC has had is just getting active transportation projects into the TIP. BMC currently incorporates standalone active transportation projects in the LRTP through a set-aside, but these projects rarely make it into the TIP, at least this is our understanding. And our understanding is that it's mainly because while BMC prioritizes projects for the LRTP, it relies on localities to establish priorities for the TIP, with BMC's role being to apply certain basic filters to ensure that the project is eligible for federal funding, is broadly consistent with the LRTP, et cetera. So to address this, there are several strategies that we'd recommend BMC or BRTB consider to address the issue based on input from the peers and previous experience of members of our project team. One strategy would be for BMC to establish a prioritization process for the TIP, similar in some ways to the LRTP, that elevates active transportation projects or makes active transportation projects competitive with other types of projects. This would require developing that process, so there's work involved in that, and would reduce local control of projects included in the TIP. Locals currently have a lot of control over those projects, and that potentially would be politically difficult. On the other hand, it would enable BMC to better align the TIP with LRTP priorities, including fostering active transportation projects. Now, several of the peer MPOs we interviewed have a system for doing this in one way or another, that is prioritizing active transportation projects in the TIP. One example is Campo, the Austin, Texas area MPO, which prioritizes all proposed TIP projects based on a project type specific evaluation matrix or criteria and a cost benefit analysis. Another is DRCOG, the Denver area MPO, which has an innovative dual model approach to evaluating TIP projects in which they divide applications up into two buckets. One bucket is called the regional share and includes projects that are directly evaluated by the DRCOG, which looks at things like whether the projects align with regional plans, make important connections, et cetera. And that accounts for 20% of all attributable TIP funding. Another bucket is called the sub-regional share, and in this bucket, localities determine the priorities within certain parameters. And that bucket is given 80% of all TIP attributable funds. So that's another possible direction that BMC BRTB could take this. Another strategy we'd recommend is that BMC and BRTB consider would be to set a minimum or target threshold for funding active transportation projects in the TIP, which could be done by establishing the target or establishing a set-aside, a minimum set-aside for active transportation. It's important to note that any such target or minimum threshold would only apply to projects requesting federal funds, since that is what's included in the TIP, and we know that a lot of projects are funded entirely at the local or state level. So some peer examples related to that, Kyle already mentioned DVRPC, but Campo also has a funding target in their TIP of 15% of discretionary funds in the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program to active transportation. MORPC has a set aside for standalone active transportation project that amounts to 15 to 25% of total MORPC attributable funds in the TIP. So those are some examples of how that's done elsewhere. Next slide. Another issue BMC has had is just fostering cross-jurisdictional projects. These projects may be really important to the region, but less important locally, or at least less likely to be proposed by local sponsors due to the additional coordination required and the politics of working on something that's at the edge of a jurisdiction rather than more central. One of our preliminary recommendations related to that is to modify the BMC's existing transportation and land use connections program to further prioritize interjurisdictional projects, for example, by giving such projects additional points when selecting projects to fund. Another is to develop a visionary transportation network, which is something that BMC is already doing through the Bikeable Baltimore Regional Network. And a third is to foster an organization to advocate for construction of the visionary network, like the Capital Trails Coalition in the DC region. And I'm going to pass it over to Jim Sebastian to kind of talk about how the Capital Trails Coalition works and how they've been able to foster development of the visionary network.
Thanks, Jim, and thanks for bringing me with you today to talk to our colleagues in Baltimore. Baltimore area, the Capital Trails Coalition is pretty unique in the sense that it really started with the work at the MPO in the Bike Head Committee there, and there were some elected officials and staff there who were interested in, and they had seen the Atlanta Beltline Trail, and thought we need, a well-defined, iconic trail that we can use to motivate and market, active transportation in the DC area. And they, kind of looked at what we had on the ground. And there is, for those who've been to DC, kind of already a bicycle beltway and even multiple permutations and loops on that. Anyway, they kind of came up with a regional network, and WABA engaged funding from the Boston Area Bicyclists Association, also engaged funding from REI, and they got like a full-time staffer to kind of oversee this coalition. And it's essentially a board, if you will, of combination of staff, advocates, and other stakeholders like business improvement districts and other institutions that get together every other month or so and talk about how to expand the trail network, funding sources, challenges, opportunities, things like that. So it's kind of a quasi public-private group overlaid on top of the MPO staff, like the Bike Ped Committee, because the staff at the MPO, as you probably know, cannot be as, shall we say, vocal and advocating for trails and engaging elected officials and engaging, community groups. So it's kind of like a outside institution that can help promote the trail system.
All right.
That might be more than you need to know.
No, that's great. Thank you. Thank you, Jim. Next slide. So another issue that we heard about in the peer interviews is the need for more education, outreach, and technical assistance on active transportation projects. For example, one thing that the Campo, the Austin area MPO highlighted in our interview with them is that their biggest barrier is just simply getting agencies to submit projects to the LRTP. And they felt like more communication and outreach could help address that. Dr. Cog noted that the quality and depth of the project submissions that they got through their LRTP process and their TIP process varied widely within the region, with some jurisdictions providing very detailed narratives, while others, often smaller and less resource, provided minimal information. And they felt that inconsistency signaled a need for additional education and guidance on active transportation projects. So with that in mind, one of our preliminary recommendations would be for BMC to develop a complete streets guide or toolkit. Kyle mentioned that MORPC has one. ARC also has one, and this could be used to help educate locals about what complete streets look like and different contexts in which it would how to design complete streets in different contexts and help establish expectations. And so on this particular topic, I'd like to hand it over to Byron to talk about how the Complete Streets toolkit in the Atlanta region helped promote complete streets.
Great, thank you, Jim. And I'll make this brief. It builds out of a long story for the update to ARC and Metro Atlanta's active transportation plan that we initiated in 2015. That did several things. Identified a visionary regional network that we've talked about, built on the ideas of 15-minute cities and some very foundational kind of urban planning, active transportation planning work, and then included a rubric or scorecard for what a great project looks like. We, at the time, doing a 20-county, Metro Atlanta is huge, bigger than several of the smaller states, did not have the time, money, or ability to do a super detailed prioritized project list. So what we pivoted to was looking at the TIP scoring process and saying, if a local sponsor comes to us with a project that meets these kinds of criteria, safety, comfort, connectivity, economic access, congestion mitigation, air quality, and a few other things, it will probably score well. That was a very kind of like spitball whiteboard approach to laying out what we thought active transportation projects should be doing. We pivoted from there into two kind of spin-off conversations. One was the TIP prioritization methodology, the formal TIP prioritization methodology for the whole agency, which we nicknamed the TIP Cookbook. We had a lot of home chefs on the team. So the TIP Cookbook sets the official formal rules, and it still to this day guides how projects get into the TIP. And we did a regional bike ped safety action plan, and really started to hunt down what were some of the high risk factors in Metro Atlanta, building on the Walk Bike Thrive model that we had started with. And the active transportation safety action plan, and then later a regional safety action plan that was more comprehensive, really identified continuously that 4 and 5 lane roads with low to medium commercial or low to medium residential and some level of transit service were overwhelmingly accounting for, especially pedestrian fatalities and a number of bicycle fatalities as well too. So we said from there, we don't have a great solution for what 4 and 5 lane regional arterials should look like from an active transportation perspective. They can often be low demand areas. They're often very expensive projects. Many of them are state routes in Metro Atlanta, so coordination with GDOT was very critical. So we, in response to some requests from sponsors to say, this is our most dangerous road for pedestrians, we don't know how to deal with it. The NACTO Urban Bikeway Guide had come out about the same time. Wonderful revelation for city streets, but there was nothing really for the quote unquote suburbs or regional thoroughfares, where we were seeing a lot of our very particular safety and some rising transportation demand. So we set out, we hosted a Complete Streets in the Suburbs workshop that was staffed by Tool Design. It was my introduction to the company before I came here. And from that, we built the regional workbook for Complete Streets, which is really a big collection of kind of like planning theory about where ARC would be putting its time and money to support great projects. If it was on our high injury network, if it was adjacent to our regional activity center, if it was on a high frequency transit route with MARTA or one of the other counties, and a handful of other criteria. It included some of the very early updates to the AASHTO bike guide, looking at volume and speed, compatibility and context sensitivity with bikeways, and really helped try to build a very soft guidebook. I mean, soft power, soft rules. None of that is mandatory. None of it is mandated for TIP projects. But when the ARC staff sat down to look at great projects, we had a wonderful resource that we could hand to locals and say, this is what we're talking about. This is what we're thinking is the best. And help us kind of like from a seat of a less powerful seat in the conversation, talk to GDOT, talk to the big counties, and talk about what great projects should look like. And we've seen a number of those come to fruition, built on similar models, and really help building a cohesive conversation around what active transportation looks like, so that when projects got to the hard power of regional and federal funding, we were all on the same page and could point to some really good examples, not 20 different interpretations of what a complete street might look like.
All right, thank you very much, Byron. So along similar lines, we'd also recommend that BMC develop resources, webinars, and trainings to build local capacity related to active transportation project implementation, development, and also highlight active transportation projects and issues at regular BRTB meetings. I think Jim in the chat earlier today said that, you know, at WashCog there was a saying, and Jim, chime in if I get this wrong, that they were building a better Washington region one meeting at a time. And that's really true in the case of BRTB, that just talking about active transportation on a regular basis as part of these meetings could be very helpful in advancing active transportation in the region. Next slide. So the final challenge or issue I'll talk about relates to incorporating active transportation elements within TIP roadway and transit projects. And the challenge is that active transportation elements are sometimes inconsistently incorporated into larger TIP roadway and transit projects. Sometimes they're, and part of that is related to lack of understanding or awareness about different design approaches, and there are other reasons as well. But that can be helped by adopting a complete streets policy, which we would recommend, and requiring context-appropriate active transportation elements for all TIP projects. And that's something that MORPC has done. That's the Columbus area MPO. They have a complete streets policy, and they do require that all TIP applications include active transportation facilities where it's appropriate. And that has resulted in a substantial increase in the amount of active transportation infrastructure in the region. And with that, I'll pass it back over to Kyle.
Awesome, thank you all. So at this point, we really just wanted to open it up for any questions you have on just potential policy and program recommendations. Alternatively, if there's any challenges that you all see that we haven't highlighted and think deserves policy or program recommendations, I'm interested in those as well.
I was just going to say, MDOT. Hi, Jim Sebastian. Yeah, we're attending the COG meetings over the years, their bicycle pedestrian subcommittee run by Mike Farrell. Eye-opening. I think Jim worked with Columbia at that time, and we certainly at the county level learned a lot from what they were doing. The district is, you know, it's a top-down thing. And I think our new MDOT leadership obviously is on board and updating all of our complete streets policies. So you want to look at our SHA website, what documents they're diving into now. There are a lot of them, but essentially to get these programs going, and what happened in the District of Columbia was certainly a top-down process. We're going to change these streets. We're going to modify these streets. We're going to go out and do the Dutch method, and we're going to spray paint and look and see what happens. We're going to get into design, get tool design behind that. We did that in Prince George's too. Montgomery's doing it, and our counties are doing it here. So I think just the continued sharing of information and sharing projects at the bike committee is very important. So that's just one element.
I guess my question is, like, for the tech committee, what are we going to do with this? Like, what's next in terms from Todd or Regina? Like,
What's the next steps?
Well, I think we have a couple slides on this. But
Okay.
we are currently in the development of our Unified Planning Work Program. I think there's some recommendations coming out of this individual study that we should potentially look at, both from a regional level and then trying to support that at the local level. I think what Dan had mentioned, trying to translate some of the work that's being done at the state level and see how it might be able to apply at the local level is probably a good idea. And a place potentially that, the BRTB could play a role in terms of trying to translate that so that you don't go from talking about one set of standards, looking at complete streets when you're on state road, and then transitioning to a different idea as you transition over to the local level. So with that in mind, I think we do have some additional slides.
I was gonna say, I also picked up on the idea of the small projects, because the big ones are very hard and very challenging. You may never get done. Look at 355 in Montgomery County. Talked about improving that road for 20 years, then you finally see some changes. But the big, certainly going back to some other presentations, of small projects are extremely important.
All right, well, we are definitely open to any feedback that comes to mind, after this meeting. Byron, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, thank you briefly. I want to highlight, I meant to mention it in my remarks earlier, but I wanted to echo, I think it was the public comment at the very beginning of the meeting about thinking about, I think the point was more about like kind of job access and land use access, but really making sure that conversations around active transportation are paired with land use conversations. There's a lot of great projects, and especially within a metro region, people commute farther, and having conversations around how to pair active transportation with the flip side of land use and development is very important. Sometimes that's hard for an MPO or regional government to do, but making sure that the conversation around both improving the land use and the access and the facilities all simultaneously is really important.
All right, so hopefully you all have seen this summary of the technical scoring approach that we shared last month. Wanted to just quickly open it up if anyone had any thoughts. If not, we've got this web application linked in the presentation. You can take a look and similarly share feedback with us at any point over the next month or so. And while you all are doing that, we've got some tasks out in front of us as we work to finalize a scoring methodology. So the first is documenting kind of the process from research and peer interviews to discussions with you all in the steering committee, as well as the kind of final scoring approach in a memo alongside these policy and program recommendations. We're also bringing both the revised technical scoring approach, which you all have already seen, as well as these policy and program recommendations to the steering committee in next week or early the following. At that point, we will be handing it off to you all for implementation. So again, if you have any final thoughts or questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. We'll be working on this heavily over the next couple of weeks, and we appreciate all of your feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. Next, we will discuss UPWP updates. Mr. Pat Hancock will provide a briefing on the upcoming socioeconomic forecast. Pat?
Hi, everyone. I'm Matt Hancock. If you have been to a CFG meeting before, you have seen my face. If not, hello for the first time. The CFG is the Cooperative Forecasting Group. This is a standing committee that is part of the BRTB. We develop data that is for population levels, household level, and for employment controls at the small area kind of forecast that is essential to the BRTB. So this is for our planning activities, this is for travel demand modeling, quality, conformity testing, anything you need. All this data is available to federal, state, and local government agencies and private sector businesses, members of the public. It is all shared on our website. Whenever this is all posted, there are links in the presentation as well, where you can all access this. We meet on a bi-monthly occasion, so every other month, to review changes in local land use patterns, discuss new trends, newly released census data, which is a lot of what people have been hearing me talk about for the past year, make any adjustments to our existing forecasts, et cetera. The CFG submits these forecasts to the technical committee for subsequent recommendation and endorsement for the BRTB. So that link that you see there is going to be all of the background information that you can want on the CFG if you have any additional questions there. Also, you can always reach out to me at any point. So the forecasts are produced through a bottom-up method. So jurisdictions provide their projections and forecasts to us. These forecasts, once they are delivered, are reviewed and then sent back with any recommendations. And then that's used for the development of our updated forecasts. So as of 2012, we're using an agreed upon methodology that is using for jurisdictional level employment that's formed through the combination of employment data and Census Bureau data. So largely now we are using data that is through BEA and QCEW and the United States Census to where we're forming these forecasts. So these forecasts are developed by local jurisdictions and submitted to BMC staff for review. That is me. Quality control and consistency. So we are going to look at this at the TAZ level, the transport analysis zone. This will then be looked at within each jurisdiction and provide them with an opportunity to make any adjustments before we finalize this, and it is leveled up for the approval process. Our current forecast is round 10. This was approved on July 15th, 2022. This used the 2020 census as its availability and the impetus of the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic to explore updated forecasts through 2050. Those round 10 forecast materials and everything else is related are on our website here as well. Again, that is linked in the presentation, so where you'll have access to that. Here is the round 10 summary as it exists. I know this is very small and very hard to read. Again, this is all available on our website for reference at any different point in time. It breaks it down for all of our jurisdictions by population, households, and predicted employment out through 2050. Our upcoming forecast will be round 10A, which will project out to 2055 in line with the current LRTP updates. The submissions for this have started in November 2025. We are expecting to receive all of our updates to our jurisdictions by spring 2026, and then final adoption is planned for summer of 2027. Other recent presentations that we discussed for any of those interested in attending our CFG meetings. Recently, there were new population estimates put out, the QCEW figures in American Community Survey. We've discussed our post-pandemic trends projects. We have had presentations from MWCOG and from a different county level development and holding capacities and discussions there. So not just always population forecasts, but it is the majority. And here is representation. This is not necessarily exhaustive. There are a few additional numbers, but this is the core representation of the CFG here for all of our jurisdictions. Again, this is included in your presentation for anyone who wants to reach out after. And my information is here. I'm available anytime if anybody wants to reach out or has any other questions. Also happy to answer any questions now.
Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, everybody.
Next, we will have Mr. Zach Hoffman, who will review the status of several tasks related to Region Next.
All right, so I do have a few updates on our next Baltimore Regional Long Range Transportation Plan, deemed Region Next. Ultimate adoption of that is anticipated in July of 2027, but a lot of steps lead up to that. First, we focus on goals and strategies. They kind of form the transportation vision for the region. You've heard about our needs assessment and scenario planning projects in previous meetings. Those help to inform staff updates on the goals and strategies. You also heard about project scoring this morning. Significant update being that we're developing this scoring methodology for standalone active transportation projects. And ultimately, that's leading up to when we have the call for projects, you being able to submit standalone active transportation projects along with your priority transit and highway projects. You just heard about the demographic projections for household population and employment. That's another key process. Those are coming in, and we use that in the forecast through 2055 in project scoring, as well as in evaluating projects that end up in preferred alternative and their potential impacts. Financial projections, another key factor, how much state and federal money, also local money, we anticipate to be available for projects. That feeds into the call for projects where we score projects and then develop a draft preferred alternative based on project scores, jurisdictional priorities, and how much money we expect to be available. After developing the preferred alternative, we do an analysis of the effects of programs and projects, generally a no build versus a build scenario, and develop a draft plan for public comment and ultimately a final plan development and adoption. So in terms of goals and strategies, these are the goal areas from Resilience 2050, the prior long range transportation plan. Largely, those goal areas are being retained with some adjustments to the strategies within them. They deal with access, mobility, safety, maintaining existing infrastructure, environmental responsibility, system security, prosperity and economic opportunity, fostering participation and cooperation, and promoting informed decision making. And so each of these goal areas then has a suite of strategies that can help us to achieve those. You have seen a more in-depth presentation of our proposed revisions to the goals and strategies in the September and October meetings. I've also shared the revisions and a clean version with all of you. I'm happy to reshare that. But by and large, the revisions focused on simplifying and combining redundant strategies, integrating information learned from UPWP projects that have happened in the interim, such as the Likeable Baltimore Region project, making plain language updates, insofar as that's possible, eliminating some of the transportation speak, and integrating recommendations largely from the transportation needs assessment, because that was a survey targeted explicitly towards the regional goals, but also from the scenario planning project as possible. So again, I've gone through these updates kind of in more detail in previous meetings, and we made those kind of plain language updates, et cetera. But in very brief summary, we kind of refine the accessibility goal to focus explicitly on access. Sometimes you can mix the concepts of access to opportunity with mobility. And so we kind of tried to refine that so it focuses explicitly on access to jobs, schools, housing, parks, services, all the kinds of things you want to get to by multiple modes. Mobility, refining that to make sure we're including separate strategies for different system users, not just travelers, but also maintenance, operation, and emergency response, as well as goods movement. Safety, refining that to make sure that we have strategies focused on all roadway users, drivers, occupants, non-motorists, and very importantly, workers in safe work zones, event incident scenes. For improving and maintaining the existing infrastructure, we kind of had overlapping strategies that weren't like clearly differentiated. So we tried to clearly differentiate these by condition of roads, bridges, electronic roadway equipment, transit vehicles and infrastructure, as well as active transportation facilities. For environmental responsibility, largely retained existing strategies and combined some redundant strategies. For system security, we, in addition to combining some strategies, we broadened that to include cybersecurity, as well as revised the funding strategy to recognize that some security and resilience funding can come from non-transportation sources, and to the extent possible, we should seek after those funds instead of just the traditional transportation sources. For promoting prosperity and economic opportunity, we continue to emphasize coordination of land use, transportation planning, housing availability, and economic access through initiatives such as transit-oriented development, and made minimal changes to the remaining foster participation and informed decision-making goals. So again, that was fairly quick, but I'm happy to reshare the proposed provisions to the goals and strategies. As far as project scoring, Resilience 2050 scoring included two elements that you're aware of. There's the policy score that is largely in your hands, where you can submit projects based on your prioritization. High priority, receive 30 points, medium priority, receive 20, low priority, 10. If a project already has demonstrated financial support in the CTP or a CIP, they get an additional bump. So a total of up to 40 points were allocated to the policy score in Resilience 2050. The technical score was the criteria for that were drawn from the regional goals and strategies. So we score projects on safety, accessibility, mobility, environmental conservation, security, and economic prosperity. BMC staff do that scoring. And here is a breakdown of how those points were divided amongst various goals. Now you'll notice that transit is eligible for 55 points versus 50 for highway. We had presented that 5-point bump or 10% bump for transit projects when we were considering that in November of 2021. That was in response to public comments that encouraged the BRTB to focus on transit and active transportation implementation versus highway projects. And so there's a little bump for transit projects. But by and large, scoring shares across the goals are the same for the various goal areas. Safety receiving 10 points. Accessibility receives 15 points for transit versus 10 for highway. Mobility received 10 across both project types. 2 environmental criteria receive a total of 10, and security and economic prosperity received 5 points. So then we would sum up the technical and policy scores to achieve a total score. Now, we are considering some fairly minimal changes to the highway and roadway technical scoring process. We will elaborate on these further. The largest change is really incorporating the bicycle and pedestrian scoring recommendations for those standalone bicycle and pedestrian projects. And so we will be able to score standalone active transportation next to highway and transit projects. In terms of adjustments to the existing technical scoring for highway and transit, for safety, we're considering increasing the points associated with that goal to align with state and local priorities and the importance of safety and reducing injuries and fatalities. For highway, the current criteria deal with consistency with strategic highway safety plans at the local and state level. We're considering potential new criteria that align with performance measures associated with reducing injuries and fatalities. For transit safety, again, considering increasing points. The current criteria deal with the degree to which safety projects are anticipated to improve safety for transit users, including personal safety. For potential new criteria there, we want to, one, capture safety improvements from mode shift from auto to transit. So if you're moving from driving to transit, transit has lower crash rates. So capture that safety improvement, and also consider a criteria that aligns with our performance measures in terms of injuries and fatalities. For accessibility, our current criteria look at complete streets features associated with highway and transit projects, as well as access to jobs. Potential modifications here could be adding non-employment access, particularly to the transit scoring. Now that gets a little bit complicated with our modeling. And so we will seek to incorporate that to the extent possible. Our model incorporates, jobs as part of the forecast, but access to other destinations is a little trickier. But to the extent possible, we would like to incorporate a measure for that. We'd also like to evaluate access using comparable travel times for roadway and transit, as well as potentially refining the complete streets features criterion to ensure that the complete streets features that are being incorporated are appropriate for the facility. So if it's a bicycle lane associated with the project, is it providing separation or not, if based on user comfort. For mobility, partially because we are increasing the points associated with safety and access already gets a lot of points, we are considering reducing the points associated with mobility. Our current criteria will get delay for roadway and connectivity and ridership for transit. Potential new criteria could be to consider not just delay for roadway, but also the potential or whether a roadway project includes features that would promote an increase in non-SOV trips. That would help to align with our performance measure for non-SOV. And so largely to align with our performance measures. We're largely going to retain the existing transit criteria, I think. So I don't think that would change a lot. Environmental conservation, we'll retain the criteria associated with measurement of emissions and effects on ecologically significant lands. We may refine the points given or not given based on anticipated project emissions. And also will largely, I think, retain the scoring for security and economic prosperity. For security, we focus on adjacency or whether a project is on a mobility route for evacuation or an evacuation route for mobility. And for economic prosperity, we look at alignment with existing assets and programs such as PFAs, sustainable communities, and opportunity zones. So preliminary timelines here. We've been working to kind of flesh out the financial forecast, and we're still working on that, which has delayed us a little bit. But goals and strategies we anticipate bringing to you all in spring or summer of 2026. Project scoring updates, again, also in spring or summer of 2026. So this year, in the next few months, so it's coming up. Demographic projections, you heard from Matt. We anticipate finalizing those this summer so that we can utilize those for scoring, as well as analyzing the effects of programs and projects. Financial projections are also in process. That will all be immediately followed by a call for and scoring of candidate projects. That accompanying that is updating cost estimates for projects. I think you're all aware of escalating project costs, so that will play a big role in fiscal constraint of this plan. Then, after all that is done, we bring a draft preferred alternative to you all for evaluation. We evaluate the potential effects of that draft preferred alternative, have a draft plan, goes out for public comment, and anticipate final plan development and adoption in the summer of 2027. So a lot of work to get done over the next year and a half. that is all I have for you today. I know that was a lot of information, but we will be coming back every month, so you'll be informed. I will say that we're currently developing web text for a new webpage for the LRTP, and so that will be up hopefully this month. And we'll be including kind of a summary of this process, as well as products that led up to this, and the proposed revised goals and strategies, and all that information will be on that website.
Thank
So-
you, Zach. Are there any questions for Zach?
Zach, with the updates in scoring,
Yeah.
a lot of the projects that are in the long range plan will be carried over. You know, you have them in the current plan, they'll be carried over.
Well, we don't.
Update, you'll need to update all those projects based on this new scoring.
We would, yes, and that's generally how we have handled it in the past. We haven't assumed just carrying everything over because
Right, we have
the
to-
financial
we have
forecast,
to.
the financial forecast changes, et cetera. So, you know, we'll certainly share the prior project submittal forms. We don't anticipate huge changes to that. We will need to capture if there's new information we want associated with the updated project scoring criteria, we'll have to incorporate that. But you'll have your prior submittal forms, but they will need to be submitted and scored.
And then they would be scored under the new criteria.
They would, yes.
Okay.
How etched in stone is the rubric for the the priority score? And we're going with this is, you know, we have this, you know, up to 5 projects for high, 4 projects for medium, and unlimited for low. But as I think the commenter pointed out, that's strongly correlated with the size and scale of a project.
Yes.
And so would it be crazy to say that if you submit smaller projects, you could submit more in the medium or high category?
I would say it's not etched in stone, that we are considering updates and are certainly looking for feedback from you all on the policy score. And that you make a good point. I don't know that I can like respond explicitly right now. I would say that in regards to the active transportation scoring, for example, we were talking about potentially incorporating a similar policy rubric explicitly for those projects to account for the fact that, you know, perhaps jurisdictions would not be submitting standalone active transportation projects under this policy scoring setup as their high priority projects. We hadn't discussed modifying the number of projects based on project cost, but I think based on the budgetary environment and based on what the financial forecast might look like, that is probably a pretty good idea. So I don't know, Todd, if you have any other thoughts.
No, I think everyone's struggling with that. And in fact, you see it in the discussion of the state, potential state scoring system, cost benefit analysis and things like that. How do you try to fix the issue that you're talking about? And we are certainly open to suggestions. I think we'll bring it up as we start getting into the adoption scoring system. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Zach. Next, we will have Mr. Todd Lang lead a discussion on the upcoming UCWP focus areas.
Okay, my job is to keep this under 2 hours. So I'm going to be whipping through this and don't blink. So I'm able to figure out which presentation. Okay. So this is just a continuation of the discussion of the development of the fiscal year 2027 planning budget for the Unified Planning Work Program, which we've been talking about for a couple of months at the tech committee here. This is just the schedule. It's all leading up to the next technical committee meeting on February 5th, where we're going to be asking you to release for a 30-day public comment the draft work program. We've been talking about topics for the last couple of months. Ultimately, the final adoption of this becomes in April, and then the money becomes available July 1st. So we are getting to crunch time. As we've been developing these topics, we put out a survey just so that everyone could weigh in, because this is a member-driven unified planning work program. Here is the latest results of the survey, but we do have a lot of interest in most of the topics, I would say. So we're going to try to figure out how we can build the program around what you have indicated that you're most interested in. Again, only 11 of the members have submitted so far, so there's still a few people that could throw in your vote if you would like. And we will again try to make sure that we get the most interest of what's going on out there. And if there's any questions about any of these individual projects, these are project ideas at this point. So we have some detail, but we would also then want, some input from the technical committee before we close out. 2 new project suggestions came in. We're going to want to figure out, because they are anonymous, who actually made these suggestions, because we think that they're fairly interesting and want to try to get more thoughts, since we didn't have too much ability to write details on these. One is looking at jobs and location access and analysis. Basically, I like the phrase, is transportation getting us to work? Then there's the incorporating green infrastructure into transportation projects. I think that's also a very interesting project where we might be able to build those on a regional level, and then have you kind of bring those into your local projects and the state program. And then the continuation of funding, a lot of interest in some of the existing projects that we've been doing so far. So that is a very quick picture. We are going to be building a draft work program, bringing it back to you at the next technical committee. But meanwhile, if you have not completed the survey, do so. If you have additional project ideas, similar to what we've just heard about, potentially Fleet Streets program, some of the rest of the items that you saw in the presentation earlier today, please let us know and we will build that. With that, are there any questions? Okay, got through that pretty quick. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. Moving on to other business. The next tech committee meeting will be virtual on Tuesday, February 3rd, followed by the Congestion Management Committee. Is there any other business to come before the committee?
Yes, Madam Chair, we would like to discuss the upcoming meeting schedule for November of 2026.
Real quick, I printed for MDOT, just came out this week. Next week is the grant roadshow. So you have the dates here. I can email it to the members online. And we have a calendar to distribute, but an issue came up that the November meeting would fall on the day of the midterm elections if state agencies are closed. I believe the city of Annapolis. We recommend moving that date. I just think it would be problematic. And I will email this to the members online, but we could go to the Tuesday before. So check your calendar for October 27, the Tuesday after November 10, or maybe you just switch from Tuesday to Wednesday, November 4. If you could let me know by Tuesday next week, just email me and say, my number 1 priority is this is my number 2. And I'll email everybody so you can just respond back. But wherever we get the most right now, I don't know, but I think it would be best if the committee moves that date.
Madam Chair, I also would like to just take a moment if I could. This is the last technical committee which Regina will be attending as a full-time employee of VMC. She is going to be doing a well-deserved retirement at the end of the month. We don't want to let her go. Really, no words that I can express her appreciation for all that she's done for the organization, for the region, and for myself personally. She's made my life bearable for the last 16 years. So I'm grumpy. My work isn't getting done for Regina, but we do wish her well, and thank you very much for the applause for Regina. Thank you.
Let me just stand for just a second so I can see all of you. I mean, Steve, but for David and Kwok, who's online, we've spent some time together, haven't we?
That's very true.
Thank you. Thank you, Kwaku. The staff here and working with Todd, I mean, is a great team. And I'll extend that to working with you all. So it's been a great pleasure and I hope you all stay engaged in your role, whether it's locally or state agencies. Thank you.
Thank you, Regina.
I just want to say thanks, Regina, for always getting to the point. A lot of time, Dan, I need this tomorrow. You know, that's better when people are too direct. I love it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Regina. We appreciate everything you've done and enjoyed working with you and wish you the best in your retirement. Congratulations. Very happy for you.
All right, hearing no other further business, I ask for a motion to close the meeting.
Baltimore City second.
All right, thank you, Baltimore City. Have a good rest of the day, everyone.
Thank you.